MC Championship is known for having a wide array of games that test every part of a player's Minecraft skill. Some test your skills at PvP, some test your technical skills in parkour, some are beloved, and some are, wrongly, hated. But the game at the center of today's video tests, above all, your communication and your teamwork skills. And it's developed a little bit of a confusing perspective around it. It's gone from a darling game that the community loved at its release to now having a bit of a reputation as being overplayed and slightly boring. That game is none other than Grid Runners. First introduced in MCC 16, Grid Runners tests teams' ability to complete 8 back-to-back challenge rooms as quickly as possible and be the first to race across the finish line. The challenge in each of these rooms are moved from event to event, but generally the first 6 rooms are more straightforward, with tasks usually being to do things like slay mobs, shoot targets, reconstruct builds based on callouts from your teammates, or to locate items hidden in a maze, leading up to a penultimate and often more difficult task, usually involving redstone, which, I mean, yeah, that's fair, ending in a final sprint to race across the finish line. Each room is scored not based on who completes it first, but by who completes it the fastest. I'll talk a little bit more about how the scoring factors into it later, but I find personally this system really works because even if you're in last place because you had a really slow first couple of rooms, if you take 30 seconds to complete a room where the first place team takes 2 minutes, then your team gets the max coins for the room when the scores are eventually tallied at the end. So that's the basics of Grid Runners, which is great and all, but what's caused the game to develop the mixed reputation that I mentioned earlier? For a lot of people, Grid Runners just doesn't have that hook or tension that other games like Sands of Time, where making one mistake could mean that your team loses everything, or Meltdown, where you're constantly on the edge as there could be a life or death fight behind every corner. Grid Runners just doesn't have that feeling. It's pretty rare to see more than 1 or 2 teams not finish Grid Runners, and the point differentials between coming in first and coming in second, third, fourth, etc. really aren't huge enough to swing the event in one way or another. It's what a lot of people would consider a safe game or a buffer game, where the outcome doesn't really influence the greater event and push someone up on the leaderboard. It's often exactly for that reason why we see Grid Runners played in the first half of the event when the coin multipliers are low, and only twice in the whole history of MCC has it ever been a finale game. Another criticism I see often levied against Grid Runners is that it's just become too repetitive and overplayed. Ever since it was introduced to the event in MCC 16, Grid Runners has been in the game rotation 26 times. To put that in perspective, that means that Grid Runners has only not been a possibility to play 5 times. Those events being MCC 22, which was the same event that introduced Meltdown, MCC Scuffed, MCC Pride 2023, Party, 4KO, and Twitch Rivals Europe. A common trend is that only a bit more recently has Grid Runners been omitted from the event, with the introduction of new games like Railroad Rush and Bingo returning from the vault. But those long stretches of Grid Runners always being in the rotation has led to many people simply being tired of seeing it played. Since it never really shakes up the tournament in a meaningful way, many people write Grid Runners off as just being a filler game, taking the spot on the roster of another more deserving, more exhilarating game. But is that all Grid Runners can ever hope to be? Is it doomed to elicit nothing but sighs and contempt from the audience every time it's selected in the Decision Dome? Well, allow me to affix my oratory cap, and I would be happy to tell you the truth the masses have sought to keep hidden from you for so long. Grid Runners. It's pretty good, actually. Wow, how about that? Only 3.5 minutes into the video and I've only now just arrived at my thesis. 9th grade English really failed me here. Sorry, Mrs. C. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that Grid Runners is the greatest game of all time and infallible of all criticism. I'm just not gonna die on that hill. You don't want to know what game would make me do that. Anyways, look man, I love Grid Runners. I think more than a lot of the other games in the lineup, I look forward to Grid Runners. There's just always the promise of something being new, a new map, a new room or two, a remix, an old room being used for something else. Something is always different. A lot of other games, like let's take BattleBox for example. It might change maps or player kits every time, but normally it's a map that's been played at least once before, and you are effectively playing that map 9 times as you battle each of the opposing teams. Taking on a game like Ace Race, the best part of Ace Race are those first time runs when it's a brand new map, no one's VOD reviewed, no one's learned the optimal routes yet. It's just a straight battle of on your feet thinking and technical skill that's going to determine the winner. Plus, new Ace Race maps are just awesome, and lately they've all been showing off some new mechanic that's been built into them, like the wind turbines, or the new tridents, All of this to say, variability is good. Now, I know you're thinking, that's a brave thing to say. No one else has the guts to say these things. You wonder why it takes me a year between these uploads? It's because the haters are always sabotaging me and stopping me from speaking my mind. Now, where was I? Anytime we can change the existing formula and give a pleasant, surprising experience to viewers and players, that gives them a reason to come back for the next event and the one after that and so on. And while a new Ace Race mount can take a long time to be created and a new battle box room needs to be tested to ensure everything is balanced, a new Grid Runners room can come together much quicker and easier, I feel, as it only needs to be an obstacle for like 2 minutes, and then you're out the door to the next room. I'm sure Noxcrew has like a whole warehouse just full of Grid Runners rooms collecting dust, just waiting to slot them into the event at some point. But wait, I hear you say, is changing 1 or 2 rooms in a lineup of 8 really enough? Is that really enough variability? Well, that's pretty subjective, I guess, but it is where I'd offer a bit of critique and advice for the game. It strikes me every year, especially during the Christmas and Halloween events, just how far a good coat of paint can go in completely refreshing certain games and places. Snows of Time feels special, despite being no different gameplay-wise to Sands of Time. It's just a little bit more blue. And the decorations that dot the background during the Halloween event are always a lot of fun to spot, and they add a ton of aura to the game. So do that a little bit more. It doesn't need to be an entire server-wide festive event or big renovations across a lot of the other games, just a fresh coat of paint on some of those rooms we tend to see more frequently in the lineup. I'll give you an example. Search the House. That room has been used 8 times for all the times Grid Runners has been in the event. The items you're hunting for, those have changed, but the actual layout and look of the house never has. Just adding new builds completely refreshed the game, because now you can't VOD review and rely on past experience. You have to think fast on your feet, which is what Grid Runners should be about. So those are a couple things that they could add or change to really help freshen up the look and feel of Grid Runners. But another reason why I enjoy it so much is that individual contributions really matter to completing the course quickly. There are some rooms where it's very easy to get carried by your teammates, sure, but whenever a team enters a brand new, never-before-seen room, the first thing everyone does is just run around and scramble and try to figure out what the heck is going on. If you're the first person to get it and understand exactly what needs to be done, you've just become the most valuable person on that team. Even if it's just for a little while to point your other teammates in the right direction. It's also a lot of fun from a viewer's perspective to kind of be an armchair competitor from time to time and say, oh, I figured this out in X number of seconds and these guys are so slow and blah, 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 blah. It's just fun. Everyone gets a chance to be involved and make decisions, and it just feels good to be the first one to solve a problem and help out others. I've also started to notice more recent Grid Runners rooms locking players into specific roles whenever they enter a new area. For example, in the Ender Cup most recently, the Hill puzzle. 3 players get split up randomly into their own boxes where they control a certain colored piston, and the 4th player, randomly, has to navigate up a few platforms, call out the buttons they need to be pressed to move on to the next color. Now normally I would advise against taking away player choice, as that's usually a bad move, but in this instance I thought it was a lot of fun because it forced a new player to be the shot caller on the team, getting them more involved in the decision making process. Like I said, it's just fun on a psychological level to know that you're being helpful and being an asset to the team and working through a puzzle together rather than feeling like it's the one person who's played loads of MCCs carrying everybody through the whole time. Now I'm not saying get a first-time MCC player to hit a triple Neo over lava while everyone else plays Find the Button, but something that changes up the dynamic every now and again would be good. It's a good time for everybody if everybody is involved. So I'd love to see them do this a little bit more, put in a few more rooms like this. So while I can't say that Grid Runners is necessarily my favorite game in the whole roster, I always really look forward to it getting played because each time I know it's coming up, I know I'm in for something new and fresh. Take a mental trip with me for a moment. This is the peak Grid Runners experience to me. A team enters a brand new room, everyone's searching for the first clue to solve a puzzle, comms start to get quiet, the confusion sets in, players really start to analyze the room and the tools they have, and then that music, oh, that beautiful music starts to set in. Perfection. The folks over at Noxcrew have been absolutely cooking the last few events with grid runners, so I have full faith they'll keep innovating and making additions that the community will enjoy. I also hope I've given a good explanation of things that I personally like about the game, and also some critiques and things I think could be a good refresher for some of the staler aspects. Tell me down in the comments, do you agree with any of the things I've said here today, or am I way out of my gourd? And maybe drop a sub while you're down there, hey? Thanks for watching, see you guys next time.